Hi, my name is Rich, and I'll be your pilot today for the New York Skyline Tour in the Cessna 172. It's 2000 hour Zulu time here at Central Jersey Regional Airport in Manville, New Jersey. It's a brisk December day, the weather is clear, and there's no wind. Let's go over our route of flight, and it's shown in the ForeFlight iPad app here in front of us. We are looking at the New York sectional map, and superimposed on that is our route of flight. The magenta segment indicates the active segment, and the blue lines indicate future segments of our flight. The pulsating blue dot represents our current position. It will change to an airplane once we're in flight. So we will take off from runway 25 in the southwest direction, and we'll make a climbing right turn to a heading of east and an initial altitude of 1,500 feet. We will need to stay below the Newark Airport Class Bravo airspace, and as we approach this inner ring, the bottom of the airspace is at 1,500 feet. So we'll descend from 1,500 to 1,200 feet and continue on to the New York Harbor. Then once we're abeam of the Verrazzano Bridge, we'll turn north and pass over the bridge at 1,200 feet. As the top of the towers are at 700 feet, we'll be the required 500 feet above the towers. So we'll continue on, and we will stay along the right shore of the Hudson River, seeing the sights. Now, once we hit this point, we will deviate from the flight plan in the GPS, but instead continue to hug the shoreline of the Hudson River. We'll recapture this segment of the flight plan and turning left towards the waypoint called Nyack, and then southwest. And then we will capture the Teterboro runway 19 ILS, or Instrument Landing System Localizer and Glide Slope, taking us down to Teterboro Airport. So that's our flight plan. And now let's get a lay of the land here at Central Jersey Regional Airport. You can see we're half off of ramp number 4 with one wheel on the gravel. So when we start moving, we'll have to give the airplane sufficient power to break free. In front of us is the taxiway, and here you can see the runway. So we'll turn right onto the taxiway, and at the far end, we'll do our magneto test and run up, and then we'll enter the runway and take off. Okay. Now that concludes the briefing, and now let's do the pre-flight of the airplane, starting outside. So we'll remove all the wheel chocks, tethers, cowl covers, pitot tube cover. We'll check all the control surfaces, check the fuel tanks for sufficient fuel, and drain some fuel to check for moisture. With that done, we'll come into the cockpit and begin our pre-flight. Okay, you'll notice that the yoke is visible and hiding our instruments. So in the simulator, we can hide the yoke by pressing the Y key, giving us a clear view. In the actual cockpit, the yoke does not block the view of the instruments. Now I'll start reading from our checklist. All instruments off, parking brake on, master switch. I'll turn it on, and as I turn it on, we will check for sufficient fuel in the fuel tanks. Master switch on, fuel sufficient. Avionics master switch on. Avionics cooling fan, it's going to make a sound, so we say audible. Avionics master switch off. Fuel selector valve set to both. Fuel shutoff valve in. Flaps. (10 degrees, 20 degrees, 30 degrees. And now we retract the flaps. Look back in the cockpit. And we do a pitot heat test. We're going to turn on the pitot heat and check for ammeter current draw. Pitot heat on. Current draw correct. Pitot heat off. Master switch off. And that concludes the initial pre-flight check. Next, we'll go through the engine start sequence. Master switch on. That was here. Beacon on. Throttle. Open 1/4 inch. Mixture. Full rich. Auxiliary fuel pump. On 3 seconds. Now we turn on the ignition switch and keep our eye on the oil pressure gauge, make sure it comes up. Ignition switch on. Pressure good. Alternator on. Nav lights on. Strobe light on. Landing light on. I'll turn on the panel lights as well. We'll make sure the flap switch is in the up position, which it is. And we'll bring our engine down to idle. Okay, now we do our before taxi check. Fuel quantity checked. Flight controls. There's our elevator, rudder, ailerons, so they are free and correct. Elevator trim. Set for takeoff. Directional gyro. We set that to the compass. The compass has a heading of 340 degrees, so we rotate this knob to 340. Okay, avionics master switch on. This is a Garmin G530 GPS and navigation communication device. Below is a Garmin 430, which has the same electronics but is half the size. So this is COM1 Nav 1, this is COM2 Nav 2. COM1 Nav 1 has been superseded by a Garmin GTN 750, which is popped out here. So I will press continue. Okay, the next order of business is for us to listen to the weather. The closest automated terminal information system is Newark Airport.
Newark Liberty INTL Information Hotel. 1900 Zulu weather. Wind calm, visibility more than 10. Sky clear, temperature 13, dew point -16. Altimeter 2992. Arriving runways 1122 left, departing runway 22 right. Advise on initial contact you have hotel.
Okay, so the altimeter setting is 2992. We set that in the altimeter box. It's already set, and we're displaying the correct elevation of the field at 86 feet. We need to set our radios. CTAF for Central Jersey Regional is 122.7. So I'll set the standby frequency to 122.7. And flip it over to the active position. And now we have a frequency of 123.05 displayed in standby, which is a frequency we'll need in the Hudson River corridor. We'll read the message. It says software provided for entertainment use only. Okay, acknowledged. Now we can go to our flight plan and enter the flight plan. I'll press menu and then catalog. It's already stored as flight plan from Airport 47N to K Teterboro. So we'll activate it. Okay. Now go back and press the map. And you can see we have our magenta line in the GPS that matches the magenta line in ForeFlight. As we'll be taking that ILS approach into runway 19er at Teterboro, we need to enter the frequency for that approach. It's 110.15. It's already entered. We need to turn on our transponder because we're in controlled airspace. Right now it's showing it's on standby here. So I'll press the on button right there. Now we're showing it's in ident mode with a frequency of 1200. We'll also need to turn on our ADS-B out unit, which is installed in the aircraft, which is a new requirement by the FAA. We have a GPS nav toggle switch, which will set to GPS for our initial flight, so that the autopilot can track the GPS setting. Okay, that concludes the before taxi checklist. And now we'll make an initial radio call, and then we'll taxi to the run-up area. Central Jersey Regional, Skyhawk, 614 Foxtrot Alpha, on ramp 4, taxiing to runway 25, Central Jersey. Okay, now we take off the parking brake, we apply throttle, and we move on to the taxiway and make our way to the run-up area. Okay, we'll move to the side so other aircraft can pass if they'd like to as we do our run-up. We'll turn into the wind. and I hold the brakes. We're going to increase the RPM to 1,800, and then we're going to switch the ignition switch first to from both magnetos first to only the right and then only the left, looking for an RPM drop of no more than 50 to 100 RPM here. Okay, so we bring our RPM up to 1,800. Okay, right magneto, 50 RPM. Drop left magneto, 50 RPM. And we can reduce our throttle. This is a fuel injected engine, so there's no carburetor heat. But if we had a carburetor, we would check that as well. Okay, now we're moving up to the whole short line for runway 25.
Approaching runway 25.
Okay, that's ForeFlight advising us we're approaching the runway. So at this point, we're going to check for traffic. And we look both ways. And we don't see any traffic. So we make a radio call. Central Jersey Regional Skyhawk 614 Foxtrot Alpha, departing runway 25, Central Jersey. Now we make our way onto the runway. And we line up. And we smoothly apply full throttle. Keep an eye on the oil pressure gauge. Apply right rudder to counteract the left turning tendencies of the airplane. And at 55 knots, we rotate. And we're going to keep the cowl just over the horizon. And we're going to adjust the trim to relieve some of the pressure on the yoke. Maintaining an airspeed between 75 and 80 knots. We have a good climb right now of 900 feet per minute on this cool day. And once we're 800 feet above ground, we'll start that climbing right turn. Central Jersey Regional, Skyhawk 614 Foxtrot Alpha, departing the traffic pattern to the east, Central Jersey. Okay, we made our radio call, and now we're 900 feet above ground. And we start a turn. Okay, we're approaching east. We're going to level out. And we reach our altitude. So we'll bring down the nose. Now I've engaged the autopilot to hold 1,500 feet. And I'm also going to engage the autopilot to track our course. And I'll do that here in the autopilot by pressing the navigation button. So now we're in what's called GPS steering mode, which means that the autopilot is following the course that we have put into our GTN 750, and that's being mimicked here by the ForeFlight app. There you can see we have a little plane showing our course. Our airspeed is 121 knots, so we're going to reduce it to 115. Okay. And we're on our way. So we're in an easterly direction over the state of New Jersey. We can change our views. And this is the view out the cockpit. My simulator actually has a screen on the bottom showing all the instruments and the controls. So we can fly this way with the controls still visible to me. We're going to begin our descent now to 1,200 feet. We're at 1,500. I'm going to reduce power slightly so that we maintain our airspeed. And now we're leveling off, and I'll increase power again. Okay, let's check our instruments. Airspeed is indicating 115 knots, which is where we want it. The attitude indicator is indicating level flight. Altimeter is indicating 1,200 feet. Turn coordinator shows level flight. Vertical speed indicator shows level flight. RPM indicator is showing 2,500 RPM. This is our VOR. And inside it has a CDI, or course deviation indicator. It's receiving the signal from this GPS and is showing our course as this vertical line. If the vertical line is straight up and down, that means we're on it. If the vertical line deviates to the right, that means the course is to our right and we are left of it. But right now we're right on track. The horizontal line will be used to track the glide slope for our approach into Teterboro. Let's change our frequencies to get ready for the flight up the Hudson. So I'll press the flip-flop switch here and put in a frequency of 123.05. I'll also change the standby frequency to that of Teterboro Airport, which is 119.5. And I'll change the COM2 frequency, which is harder to read, to that of Teterboro Airport. It would be shown down here. So our frequencies are set. We're at 1,200 feet on a nice afternoon. And in the distance, we can see the Manhattan skyline already and the New York harbor. In front of us is Staten Island, which we will cross. And then we'll turn left to go up the Hudson River. Here's our view from outside the airplane. It's kind of cool. Okay, right now, as I said, we're in GPS steering mode. That GPS flight plan is not accurate enough for us to just hug the shoreline. So we're going to have to control the heading ourselves. And we'll do that in heading mode for the autopilot. So the directional gyro here has what's called this heading bug that will allow us to set the aircraft heading. So first I will set the heading bug to our directional flight using this knob. Okay, now that's done. And we'll come over to the autopilot and take it off of GPS steering mode and put it on heading mode by pressing this heading button. And now we're in heading mode. And the airplane is tracking the heading I have set here on the heading bug. And we're crossing over to Staten Island. Airspeed is good, 115 knots. We're pretty much right on track. This is the Outer Bridge crossing to Staten
Destination
Island.
ATIS is 132.85.
Okay, so ForeFlight has advised us to listen to the ATIS for Teterboro, but since we're not going there directly, we're going to do that at a later time, so we'll just acknowledge that alert. You can see here out the left window, out the right window. Pretty cool. My simulator has 3 monitors, so I am continuously looking out the left and the right windows. Okay, so we can see the Verrazzano Bridge in the distance. It's right there. And we can also see the Manhattan skyline. So when the left tower of the Verrazzano Bridge crosses past our left wing strut, it'll be time to turn to a northerly direction. Right now it's hidden by the front pillar. They're heading out into the harbor now. And we can see the towers just coming into view. Airspeed 115 knots, altitude 1,200 feet. Everything looks normal. Instruments are in the green. I'm checking the directional gyro, realigning it because it precesses. Okay, so now the Verrazzano is clearly in our left window, and it's about to come up to that left strut. You can see the GPS says to start turning now, but that would be too early and put us too far away from the right shoreline. Okay, so now is a good time for us to begin our turn to the direction of north. You can see the moving map is turning. The Garmin 750 always displays the direction of flight as up, whereas we have for flight set should only display north up. Okay, we're about to fly over the bridge. Kind of cool. So to our right is Brooklyn, to the left is Staten Island. Nice bridge built in the 60s, right? And now we have another viewpoint from in front of us, and that's us zooming along from a fixed vantage point. We make a radio call, Cessna VZ, 1,200 feet northbound. We can see the Statue of Liberty up ahead, right there. We're going to descend now to 1,100 feet. We are allowed to stay in an altitude range of 1,000 to 1,300 feet along this Hudson River corridor. Okay, we're down to 1,100 feet and put the speed back up. And there's Lady Liberty. It's a little disconcerting, but this is the only view I can give you. Cessna, Statue of Liberty, 1,100 feet northbound. So we made our second call. The third call is at the old Colgate clock opposite the World Trade Center on the Jersey side of the river, right there. Cessna clock, 1,100 feet northbound. So we see the World Trade Center in Lower Manhattan. So here's the Empire State Building where my cursor is. And we can also see some of the newer residential skyscrapers that have been built recently. The next reporting point is at Intrepid Aircraft Carrier, which is at Pier 86 on 46th Street. And it's up ahead. This is it. If you recall, it has the space shuttle sitting on the stern of its deck, which is enclosed in a white structure, which is visible here. And behind it on the pier is a Concorde SST. And we'll be able to see the tail of the SST sticking out, visible right there. Of course, if we dive bombed it, it'd be a lot clearer, but then we'd be busted by the FAA, so we don't want to do that. We can see the Lake and Central Park there. And up ahead is the next waypoint, which is the George Washington Bridge. So here we can get a better view of Central Park and all the buildings surrounding it. Okay, we'll do an instrument check. Airspeed, 114 knots, that's good. Attitude indicator indicates straight and level flight, 1,100 feet. Let's go back up to 1,200 as we pass over the GWB. It's a little hazy out there today, isn't it? Make our radio call. Cessna GWB, 1,200 feet northbound. And at this point, we'll continue at 1,200 feet. We'll need to be at 2,000 feet for the approach into Teterboro. You can see plenty of traffic on the GWB today. Okay, and now we'll listen to the Teterboro ATIS.
Teterboro Information Hotel. 2000 Zulu weather. Wind calm, visibility more than 10. Sky clear, temperature 13, dew point -16. Altimeter 2992. Arriving runway 19, departing runway 24. Advise on initial contact you have hotel.
Okay, we have Information Hotel with an altimeter setting of 2992. So we make sure the altimeter setting is correct. It is 2992. And when we contact Teterboro Tower, we'll have to give them Information Hotel. Now I'm banking the plane slightly to follow the river. The next waypoint is what's called the Alpine Tower. Here's our plane. It will be a radio tower on the shore of New Jersey. Okay, here's the Alpine Tower. So we'll make our radio call. Cessna Alpine Tower, 1,200 feet northbound. Okay, now we will switch the radio over to the Teterboro Control Tower frequency and make our call for the approach. Teterboro Tower, Skyhawk 614 Foxtrot Alpha, 12 miles northeast at 1,200 feet with hotel. Inbound for approach and landing. And Teterboro hopefully answers. Skyhawk 614 Foxtrot Alpha, cleared for the approach and landing. Climb to 2,000 feet. Turn left at Nyack to heading 196. And we respond, Teterboro Tower, Skyhawk 614 Foxtrot Alpha, clear for the approach and landing. Climb to 2,000 feet and turn left at Nyack to a heading of 196. Okay, so we have made our call and we have been cleared for the approach and landing. So I've expanded our moving map so you can see our position here. And here is the flight path. We need to capture this horizontal segment, so I need to change the active segment in both the Garmin 750, which I'm doing now. So the active segment is Nyack. Activate it. Press OK. I'll acknowledge the message. Now the active segment is magenta, which we want. And I'll do it as well on ForeFlight. We need to climb to 2,000 feet. So you can see our vertical speed is 700 feet per minute. Below us is a Tappan Zee Bridge. Okay, we're at 1,900 feet and we're starting to level off. So I'll begin to reduce the power. You can see on the GTN 750, we are approaching the next segment. I'm still in heading mode, so I am controlling the direction of flight using the heading bug on the directional gyro. And I'm going to check its setting now against the compass. Okay, so that was all right. Okay, and now we'll start my left turn to a heading of 287. And now I'll put the autopilot back on GPS steering mode, and then it will follow the magenta line again. Again, I'll have to hit the nav button twice to do that. Okay, so now we're following this line. And now's a good time for us to set ourselves up for the landing. So we'll follow GUMP's acronym, and GUMP stands for gas, undercarriage, mixture, prop, and seatbelts. So we'll start with gas. Make sure the fuel selector is set to both. Fuel shutoff is fully in, and we have sufficient fuel. So that's checked. Undercarriage, well, it's a Cessna 172, folks, and the undercarriage is fixed. So that is set. Mixture is full in. We never leaned the airplane because we stayed at 2,000 feet or under. So that's set. This airplane also has a fixed prop, so there's no changes to make there. And I'll make sure the seat belts and my landing lights are on. So we're set. Now we're starting our left turn, as you can see, to the next segment. Once we begin our descent, we need to be at or below 105 knots because we'll want to engage the first 10 degrees of flaps, and that can only be done at or below 105 knots. The next two sections of flaps 20 and 30 degrees require the airplane to be at or below 85 knots. So we will be slowing the airplane down. Right now, ForeFlight indicates we're 15 miles from the airplane, from the airport, with an estimated time en route of 8 minutes. Once we make our next turn, we'll need to engage the approach mode to activate the localizer and glide slope for the approach into runway 19er. Check instruments, airspeed is good, attitude indicator, the level of flight, altitude 2000, and our heading is 218. We're 1.1 nautical miles here from our next turn. Here's the airport. Okay, left turn to a heading of 196 in 5 seconds. Okay, now I'm going to move the heading bug to our current direction of 196, current heading. And I'm going to switch over to heading mode. And now I'm going to take the GPS nav switch and switch it over to nav mode so that the VOR receives a signal for the localizer. And now I'm going to press the approach mode. And with that said and done, the autopilot shows we are in approach mode with the glide slope activated. Okay, so we are in good shape. You can see the glide slope shows that the glide path is above us. So as this bar will come down until we intercept the glide slope, at which point we will descend. So we will begin to reduce power now. We cannot see our ground speed on the GTN 750 because it's blocked, but we can see it, well, we could, but I have it off on ForeFlight. So we're looking at the airspeed indicator, which is showing approximately 105 knots. You can see the glide slope indicator is coming down. As soon as it gets close to the level of flight, we'll begin our descent. Checking the directional gyro again against the compass to make sure it's set correctly. Okay, we're about to capture the glide slope here and begin our descent. And once we do that, we need to reduce power. Okay, so I'm pulling back on the throttle to about 1,800. We're 6.1 miles from the airport. At 5 miles from the airport, we'll engage the first 10 degrees of flaps. Airspeed is looking good at 100. Our descent is just under 500 feet per minute. should actually be 478, which is the rate calculated for this aircraft at 90 knots and a 3-degree glide slope. Okay, 5.2, 5.1. So I'll engage first 10 degrees of flaps. And there they are visible. So now the glide slope bar is centered, which means that we are on the glide path. And the vertical line is centered, which means we are on the localizer as well, which is left-right. Airspeed is 80. Remember, we have to be below, at or below 85. The runway itself is at an elevation of about 6 feet, almost sea level. And it's 7,000 feet long, plenty long for a little Cessna.
3 mile final runway 19.
Okay, we have a notification from ForeFlight. We're at 3 miles, so we activate the next 10 degrees of flaps to 20 degrees. And I increase the power just slightly to counteract the increased drag of the flaps. Airspeed is 75 knots, and we'll land at 70 knots. At 500 feet, we'll engage the 30 degrees of flaps. Our landing lights are on. To the left of the runway, we can see the PAPI lights. Hopefully we have 2 white balls and 2 red balls, indicating we're right on the glide slope.
500.
Okay, at 500, we engage 30 degrees of flaps. And now we maintain 70 knots. Okay, we have a nice stabilized approach. And we see 2 white lights and 2 red lights, indicating we're on the glide slope. Change, but we're very close. PAPI lights show a little high. The glide slope shows we're on glide slope. So we disengage the autopilot and start reducing power and bring the nose up. We have plenty of runway. Okay, welcome to Teterboro Airport. Okay, we're going to bring up our flaps, and our turnoff is indicated right up here. Slow down and turn off onto this taxiway. I'm going to shut off the strobe. Okay, so we're on taxiway Delta. As we cross the whole short line, we make a radio call. Teterboro Tower, Skyhawk 614 Foxtrot Alpha, clear of runway 19 or Teterboro. Okay, we'll take this left taxiway. Teterboro has 2 runways. So we came down this one, 19. We're going to need to cross runway 6 to get to the terminal. So we'll have to hold short and request permission to cross the runway.
Approaching runway 0624.
Teterboro Tower, Skyhawk 614 Foxtrot Alpha, holding short, runway 06, Teterboro. Skyhawk 614 Foxtrot Alpha, clear across runway 6. Teterboro Tower, Skyhawk 614 Foxtrot Alpha, clear across runway 6. Okay, so we make our way speedily across the runway. Teterboro Tower, Skyhawk 614 Foxtrot Alpha, clear of runway 06, Teterboro. Okay, so we cross runway 6, and we're going to taxi over to the parking area on the left, face the runway, and shut down the airplane. Alright, so I'm going to engage the parking brake. And next, we'll shut off all the instruments except for the beacon. I'll shut off the avionics master. And next, we'll set the RPM to 1000, which it is, and pull out the mixture smoothly until the engine stops. And now we can shut off the beacon, ignition switch, and the battery and alternator switches. And there you have it. Welcome to Teterboro, and I hope you enjoyed the flight today. Have a good day.